Hey guys, tonight we slip into the scorching sands of ancient Egypt, where the desert wind carries more than just grains of sand. It carries whispers of power, fear, and divine madness. You probably won't survive this, at least not mentally. Imagine standing beneath the relentless sun, your skin slowly cracking under the weight of eternity, because you're not just a king, you are a god. A living god expected to embody perfection while juggling crushing duties you don't fully understand yourself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments so I can picture you listening to this from somewhere warm or cold or somewhere that makes you wonder why you thought a bedtime history story about ancient Egyptian pharaohs was a good idea. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the palace courtyard, your sandals crunching on worn limestone, your eyes barely open because sleep has become an ancient luxury. The morning sun feels merciless as always, its light flooding the sprawling complex that stretches toward the horizon. Around you, servants scurry like shadows, performing their tasks with mechanical precision, their eyes cast low. You are not just a man, you are the pharaoh, the living embodiment of Horus on earth. Your very breath is considered sacred, and every decision you make reverberates through the lives of millions. Being pharaoh is exactly what you'd imagine from those glossy history books with fancy pyramids and smiling hieroglyphs. No, it is a grinding, relentless burden, a divine duty weighted by rituals so old they're barely remembered even by the priests who enforce them. Every sunrise demands an offering. Every sunset demands reflection. Every step you take is watched, recorded, analyzed. You've been told since infancy that you are not allowed to make mistakes. Even a slight error in public speech could be interpreted as a sign of divine disfavor. Your childhood was not filled with carefree games, but with rigorous training and strict lessons designed to instill the idea that failure was unthinkable. Remember that cold touch of the royal scribe's hand guiding you to perfectly form the sacred cartouches, those symbols of power stamped into stone to last forever. You learned to speak in measured tones, to smile without ever feeling joy, and to command as if your words shaped reality itself. One morning you stand before the high priest, an old man whose beard seems fused with the incense smoke swirling around you. He stares at you, eyes sharp and calculating, as if able to see the tiniest crack in your divine facade. You know that should you falter, rumors of weakness will spread like papyrus ink through the court. You are both omnipotent and fragile, a paradox you've come to accept. Historians still argue whether pharaohs were truly worshipped by their people as gods, or if this was largely political theater designed to enforce absolute control. Either way, the pressure was real. The title Son of Ra was not a marketing ploy, it was an existential trap. You can't forget the morning rituals either. Every day begins before sunrise, the air thick with the scent of myrrh and the sharp sting of garlic. You are anointed with oil, not because it moisturizes your skin, but because it symbolizes your connection to the gods. The elaborate headdress weighs heavily on your brow. The false beard glued to your chin feels oddly comforting and suffocating at once. You don't so much wear it as it wears you. The process is slow, almost meditative. Servants chant ancient hymns, their voices low and rhythmic, echoing off the sandstone walls. The priests handle you with a mixture of reverence and clinical detachment, a reminder that you are an instrument of the gods, not a man with desires or doubts. Any hint of hesitation is seen as heresy. But beneath the surface of this polished routine simmers a well of fear. You know deep down that being considered divine doesn't grant you invincibility. It makes you a target. Assassins don't need to challenge you openly. A poisoned goblet during the ritual, a silent blade in the night. You wonder whether the priests themselves plot your downfall, envious of your title, or terrified that one misstep could bring the wrath of the gods crashing down. Even your dreams have become strategy meetings. You wake up in cold sweats, planning the next day's appearances, the next decree, the next public display of godly wisdom. Sleep offers no escape, only a temporary lapse in your vigilance. And then there's the burden of spectacle. Every public appearance is a performance designed to impress, to awe, to terrify. You must stride through the crowds in elaborate robes, your skin shining from ceremonial oils, your eyes staring straight ahead. Smiles are measured, gestures calculated. You are not allowed to laugh freely nor show sorrow openly. That would suggest weakness. Instead, your presence must seem untouchable, unyielding. Meanwhile, rumors swirl. Whispers of secret meetings, of unholy rites performed beneath the palace. Some say you consult with oracles in hidden chambers, that you possess scrolls forbidden to common priests. The scholars argue to this day whether the pharaoh's divine status stemmed from genuine religious belief or purely political necessity. Either way, your role is clear. Maintain order, display power, and embody perfection. Even during meals, nothing is simple. Every bite of exotic meat is a symbol of dominion over the earth's creatures. Every sip of wine a ritualized connection to the gods. You sit on your throne, a mountain of gold and stone, surrounded by servants and advisors who hang on your every word, silently calculating when to betray you. That throne is a trap. The moment you rise from it, you expose yourself to envy, resentment, and conspiracy. The first thing you'll realize about being born a pharaoh is that childhood, as other kids know it, doesn't exist. From the very moment your tiny cries pierce the air of the royal palace, your life is no longer your own. It belongs to the state, the gods, and a legacy stretching back millennia. You don't grow up playing in the palace gardens or chasing pigeons across dusty courtyards. No, your childhood is more like a carefully orchestrated prison sentence, where freedom is a distant dream you aren't even allowed to imagine. Your earliest memories are of stone walls, of flickering torches casting shadows that seem to mock your every move. Servants and tutors hover around you like vultures, making sure you repeat prayers flawlessly, memorize the ancient laws without a single hesitation, and learn to speak in the precise, stilted manner deemed appropriate for a divine ruler. You are never allowed to speak out of turn. Every word is a test, every glance an evaluation. Your days begin before the sun rises, and the only game you play is one of obedience and discipline. Toys are not for amusement but for instruction. Instead of a dollhouse, you are given miniature models of temples and pyramids, which you are required to assemble with the utmost precision, as if crafting them yourself will grant you control over their real counterparts. Failure is unthinkable. There's a haunting routine you can never escape. Each morning, your body is scrubbed clean by attendants whose eyes are empty, their touch mechanical. You don't know if they pity you or envy you. Perhaps both. Your hair is meticulously braided in styles that mark your royal lineage. Your skin is anointed with scented oils, chosen not for pleasure but for their religious significance, promising the gods your eternal servitude. Meals are equally peculiar. Your plate is filled not with comfort food, but with carefully selected items designed to represent your dominion over nature. Rare birds, salted fish, bread stamped with royal insignia. You eat because it's necessary, not because you enjoy it. Some say these rituals symbolically feed your power. Others argue they're ancient superstition, preserved long after their meaning was forgotten. Sleep offers no reprieve either. Instead of restful nights, you are often awoken for impromptu religious ceremonies. The high priest may appear suddenly, robes billowing, insisting you chant sacred hymns in the dead of night to prove your favor with the gods. Your small body shivers, not from cold, but from the weight of responsibility. Historians still argue whether royal children were raised in isolation to protect them from corruption, or whether the palace was simply a terrifying labyrinth of control and surveillance. Either way, you aren't allowed contact with your peers. The other children in the palace are not playmates, they are rivals. Each of you is a potential heir, a possible replacement, an investment to be carefully monitored. Your caretakers, some gentle, some cruel, are charged with teaching you the inescapable truth. You are different. Unlike commoners, your life is not your own. You do not fall ill from simple germs or grow bored from idle games. Instead, every misstep is recorded. Every tantrum is remembered. Every display of weakness is cataloged as evidence of unsuitability. You come to understand the unspoken rule early on. The more obedient you are, the more secure your position. But deep inside, a small, rebellious spark fights to survive. You wonder if any other pharaohs once felt the same. Did Tutankhamun ever long for a normal life? Did Ramses the Great resent his tutors? There are tales whispered among palace staff about a child king who tried to run away. He was caught before even reaching the palace gates, brought back under guard, and never mentioned again. You wonder if that was you in another life. Your lessons are merciless. Mathematics, language, astronomy, each taught not for curiosity but for power. You memorize the alignment of stars to predict floods, the precise weight of grain to calculate taxes, and the ancient formulas for mixing perfumes that signify purity. Your body becomes a vessel of knowledge, a living library of state secrets. A single forgotten equation could be construed as heresy. Even at play, there are no games. There are only practice ceremonies. You rehearse processions. You practice bowing at the right angle. You learn how to smile as though you are unaware of the poison in your goblet. Every action is preparation for the day you'll officially sit on the throne. Your tutors are relentless. An old scribe named Nebet once told you that the eyes of the gods are everywhere. You are watched, he said, his voice a dry whisper. Always watched. You don't know whether he means other humans or unseen spirits, but the words stick in your mind like sand in your mouth. One particularly cruel memory stands out: being forced to recite the hymn to the sun god 500 times in a single morning, your throat raw, your voice cracking, because the high priest believed the gods demanded absolute perfection. You obeyed. You always obeyed. This is your childhood, not filled with laughter or wonder, but with chains of tradition, expectation, and dread. You grow not into a man, but into a living icon of divine duty. Court politics in ancient Egypt is not some polite debate club where well-dressed nobles exchange polite opinions over sweet wine. No, it's more like walking through a graveyard blindfolded while every corpse wants to stab you. The moment you step foot in the royal court, you're caught in an invisible web of manipulation, deception, and ancient power plays designed to either prop you up or tear you down. You slide through the massive columns of the palace's central hall, the air heavy with incense and the low murmurs of scheming voices. The polished limestone floor beneath your feet seems to echo the footsteps of every pharaoh who ever reigned, as though their spirits linger, watching, judging. Behind every smile, every nod, every deferential bow from your advisors hides a potential dagger, figurative or literal. Your high priest, a gaunt figure named Amenhotep, doesn't just advise you, he controls you. His words are laced with more power than your decrees, delivered with the practiced cadence of a man who knows exactly how to exploit your insecurities. You can't quite tell if he's guiding you toward greatness or setting you up for public disgrace. The court is a chessboard, and you are both the king and the most vulnerable pawn. Remember that strange story about a vizier who plotted to replace the pharaoh with his own son. Some say the conspiracy was real, others argue it's a cautionary myth. Regardless, every whispered conversation feels like a possible betrayal. You have to wonder, are the walls themselves conspiring against you? Your advisors aren't merely bureaucrats. They are master manipulators who have spent decades perfecting the art of political warfare. The Royal Council meets daily, ostensibly to discuss state affairs, but these gatherings are more about positioning than policy. One minister speaks of trade routes and taxation, while another subtly undermines him by questioning his lineage. You know that any sign of indecision on your part will be catalogued, analyzed, and later used as proof of your weakness. The Queen Mother, once your fiercest protector, now watches you like a lioness sizing up prey. Her smiles have grown thin over the years, her eyes sharper. You don't know if it's age or ambition driving her, but the cold calculation in her gaze warns you. Power shifts with every breath. At times, you find yourself alone in the throne room after the others leave, the silence so absolute it presses against your eardrums. You wonder if the walls whisper back. You imagine the ancient ghosts of past rulers, murmuring advice or curses you can't quite decipher. The court is a place of performance, yes, but more than that, it's a living, breathing entity designed to erode your spirit. Historians still argue whether court politics were driven primarily by personal ambition or by the inescapable structure of Egyptian theocracy. Some suggest the whole system was designed to prevent real change, trapping pharaohs in a web of tradition so dense they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. There are strange customs that raise more questions than they answer. For instance, during state ceremonies, you must wear a mask of flawless calm, never betraying doubt or fatigue. Smiling too often is considered unbecoming, while a frown could signal rebellion. The priests whisper that your emotions must be a reflection of divine will, not personal feeling. Your personal guard, sworn to protect you at all costs, isn't much comfort either. They are selected not for loyalty, but for ruthlessness. Trained in secret arts, their presence is as much to remind you of your vulnerability as to protect you from external threats. Rumor has it that a secret faction within the guard reports directly to Amenhotep, bypassing your authority entirely. Court life is a slow spiral into paranoia. Even your food is suspect. Every meal is served under the watchful eyes of the royal steward, who's rumored to have a hidden poison vial tucked somewhere in the palace. You force yourself to eat anyway, because starvation would be far worse. One afternoon, during a lavish feast meant to celebrate the flood season, you overhear two advisors speaking in hushed tones. "The pharaoh is too weak," one says. "Perhaps it's time for new blood," replies the other. You freeze, your hands tightening around your golden goblet. Their words feel like ice cutting into your skin. You pretend not to hear because acknowledging them would only give them power. There are nights when you dream of rebellion, of rising up against this suffocating system, of dismantling the very institutions that made you. But those dreams vanish as soon as the dawn breaks, replaced by the ritualistic chanting of the priests, reminding you of your sacred role. You are the linchpin of order, the axis upon which Egypt turns. Behind the gilded walls of the palace, dark magic isn't just metaphorical. It's whispered that some court officials practice forbidden rituals, consulting oracles, performing secret ceremonies, and even invoking ancient, forgotten gods. Whether this is paranoia or reality, no one dares speak openly about it. The very suggestion is heresy, punishable by death. Yet the most terrifying truth lingers. No amount of strategy or ritual can shield you from the one certainty of being pharaoh, the knowledge that the very system you serve will one day betray you. You've probably imagined that the pharaoh's greatest ambition was to live forever. After all, what better way to justify your divinity than to outlast the mortal coil itself? But the truth is far darker. Immortality wasn't an aspiration. It was an obsession, a curse carefully woven into every moment of your life, as inevitable as the desert sun. From the moment you can grasp the concept of time, you are taught that death is not an end, but a transition. The afterlife is an elaborate myth spun to both terrify and control you. You don't just build pyramids to glorify your reign. You build them to trap yourself in stone, to ensure your presence lingers long after your body crumbles to dust. Every limestone block heaved into place, every granite chamber carved deep within the earth, is a desperate attempt to freeze your legacy, to anchor your spirit where no enemy, no rival can touch it. The obsession begins subtly. As a child, you watch your first royal predecessor die, a process wrapped in hushed tones and ritualized mourning that seems more theatrical than genuine. The court speaks in measured phrases about the journey to the afterlife, the weighing of the soul, and the divine judgment you will inevitably face. But you can't shake the creeping doubt. What if none of it is real? Pyramid construction itself is a brutal affair. Contrary to popular myth, slaves weren't the primary workforce. Instead, skilled laborers, paid workers with surprisingly good conditions for their time, carried out the work. But that doesn't make it any less terrifying. Every stone you command to be laid feels like a step toward an unescapable fate. Your dreams are haunted by visions of tunnels stretching endlessly downward, the sound of pickaxes reverberating through cold, dark chambers, and the eerie hum of unfinished tombs that will one day entomb you. Historians still argue whether the pyramids were built solely as tombs or also served as political symbols to reinforce your divine status. Some suggest they functioned as power centers, designed to broadcast authority rather than to enshrine corpses. Either way, the pressure to build bigger, taller, more impenetrable monuments is unrelenting. Your obsession doesn't stop at architecture. You surround yourself with amulets, talismans, and arcane texts. Priests recite incantations daily, designed not just to honor the gods, but to weave a protective web around your soul. The Book of the Dead becomes your nightly mantra, a litany of sacred verses meant to guarantee safe passage into eternity. You memorize it word for word, even though you don't fully understand the implications. Maybe you think recitation itself keeps death at bay. But deep down, the fear never fades. Your advisors caution against hubris. The gods alone grant eternal life, they intone, eyes gleaming with something you can't quite place. Was it pity or malice? Your every movement is choreographed, as though the precise alignment of your body can stave off the inevitable collapse of flesh and spirit. You watch older pharaohs decline into madness and obscurity, their once mighty visages reduced to shadow and whisper. Your father, once a towering figure of strength, now shuffles through the palace, mumbling prayers to unseen gods. His eyes, once bright with command, are dull, haunted. There's a well-known legend among palace scribes about a pharaoh who supposedly drank a potion promising immortality. The tale goes that he lived for decades beyond his peers, but in doing so, lost all touch with reality. His body remained alive, but his mind frayed into endless paranoia. Some claim the story is fabricated to deter future rulers from such folly. Historians still argue whether it's a cautionary tale or an actual event. During official ceremonies, you catch yourself wondering if the incense smoke that curls toward the heavens is meant to purify you or to suffocate you. The rituals meant to connect you to Ra, Osiris, and Isis often feel like self-imposed punishments, designed to remind you of the thin line you walk between godhood and oblivion. Your obsession bleeds into every aspect of life. You avoid mirrors, fearing they reflect your mortality. You forbid your scribes from writing anything negative about you, ordering only hymns and declarations of power. The idea of being forgotten is worse than death itself. Each decree, each monumental statue, each pyramid is a desperate plea to be remembered long after your body dissolves. At night, the haunting sensation grows. The darkness seems to pulse around you, filled with the silent echoes of Pharaoh's past, murmuring doubts, fears, and accusations. You toss and turn in your ornate bed, the canopy heavy above, suffocating you with expectation. You clutch an amulet of scarab beetles, worn smooth from constant handling, and repeat prayers until dawn. Because that's the real curse, not death, but the unbearable weight. By now, you've probably assumed the pharaoh's life is one of absolute control, of towering pyramids and endless rituals. But there's one corner of the palace where control slips into something far more unsettling: the royal harem. Behind its ornate gates, draped in silks and shadows, lies a world of luxury, manipulation, jealousy, and ancient, strange customs you wouldn't dare whisper aloud. The harem is not merely a collection of concubines or wives designed to produce heirs, as the romanticized versions would have you believe. No, it is a closed ecosystem, a power structure of its own, where every woman is both a privilege and a potential threat. You do not visit it as a man seeking pleasure. You visit it as a god performing a sacred duty, expected to impregnate, command, and never falter. The women here, numbering in the dozens, sometimes even hundreds, are selected for beauty, intelligence, political connections, or sheer obedience. Each one is carefully vetted by the royal steward and the high priest. Their lineage matters. Their ability to obey, even more. Some come from noble families, others from obscure villages, but none are allowed to forget that their value lies in their proximity to your power. You walk through the lush gardens of the harem, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and myrrh. Servants carry trays of exotic fruits, dates, pomegranates, figs, while delicate musicians play soft melodies meant to lull and entice. But you feel no temptation. There is no romance here, only duty, a performance for both the gods and the court. Each woman knows her place. The chief queen occupies the highest rank, adorned in gold and jewels, presiding over the others like a priestess of control. Her eyes, trained sharp, scan you for weakness, for signs of favor or disdain. The lesser wives and concubines offer subtle competition, vying for attention, status, and perhaps the whispered promise of elevating their children to future pharaohs. Historians still argue whether the harem functioned more as a political institution or as a genuine network of personal relationships. Some suggest it was a way to control noble families by keeping their daughters close. Others believe it was simply a hedonistic display of power. Either way, the atmosphere teeters between opulence and oppression. The rules are strict. Contact between the women is closely monitored. Jealousy runs rampant. Secret alliances form in whispers. Spying is expected. Betrayal is inevitable. One woman, the favorite today, may find herself discarded tomorrow, replaced by a newer, younger face with fresher bloodlines. There are whispers of poisonings, staged accidents, and ritual banishments. None are openly confirmed, but none are denied either. You remember the story of a concubine who allegedly attempted to assassinate you during a ceremonial bath. The official record claims it was an accident, a slippery step, an unfortunate miscalculation. But court gossip tells a darker tale, a power play designed to eliminate a rival and shift the balance of influence. To this day, historians debate whether the incident was political intrigue or mere legend. Sex in the royal harem is no act of passion. It is ritual. Each encounter is scheduled, observed, and recorded. The chief queen oversees every detail, ensuring that each union aligns with sacred tradition. The act of procreation is wrapped in symbolism. Each child conceived is seen as a divine blessing, a physical manifestation of your godhood on earth. To fail in this task is unthinkable. The women themselves are paradoxes, at once powerful and powerless. Some are cunning manipulators, using their charms and intellect to gain influence over your decisions, while others drift into despair, their only purpose reduced to serving the state. Their lives are lived in cycles of hope and despair, beauty and decay, loyalty and treachery. Late at night, when the palace is silent except for the faint drip of water and distant animal cries, you wonder what these women dream about. Do they dream of freedom, revenge, love? Or do they dream only of survival, another day, another child, another chance to remain in the palace's tight grip? One particular legend sticks with you, a tale of a concubine who outwitted her rivals, rising to power, only to vanish mysteriously once her child was born. Some say she was exiled. Others whisper of something darker, a ritual sacrifice meant to appease the gods. No records confirm the story, but it lingers like a shadow over the palace. In the end, the royal harem is not a sanctuary of pleasure or comfort. It is a microcosm of your reign itself, a delicate, disturbing balance of power, fear, ambition, and survival. Each smile hides a threat. Every whispered compliment conceals a dagger. You trudge back to your chambers, the weight of divine duty pressing down harder than ever, knowing that in the quiet of the night the harem does not sleep. It watches. It waits. It's easy to think of ancient Egypt as a land of eternal sunshine, of towering pyramids and unstoppable pharaohs, untouched by the common ailments that plague ordinary mortals. But that's a romanticized lie. In reality, your body, though believed to be divine, is fragile, hanging by a thread as thin and brittle as papyrus. You wake one morning with a vague dizziness, the sensation like 1,000 tiny needles pricking your skin, invisible but relentless. The court physicians, more like alchemists in long robes than real doctors, rush in, carrying strange concoctions in ceramic jars. Their faces are serious, their eyes betraying neither hope nor despair. They speak in cryptic phrases, describing your symptoms in language half forgotten by time, as if invoking obscure incantations will somehow summon health. Illness is treated as both a medical problem and a spiritual crisis. You are not just sick, you are cursed, possibly punished by the gods for some unseen transgression. A simple fever becomes a terrifying omen, a persistent cough a sign of divine wrath. You are wrapped in layers of linen, sprinkled with mysterious powders and fed bizarre mixtures, honey mixed with crushed beetles, or wine laced with ground minerals whose purpose you don't dare question. Historians still argue whether these treatments were based on empirical observation or pure superstition. Some believe ancient Egyptians had surprisingly advanced medical knowledge, while others suggest most remedies were nothing more than desperate attempts, passed down from half-remembered rituals. Either way, the results are unpredictable. There are pharaohs in history whose deaths remain inexplicably sudden. Take Pharaoh Siptah, for example. His demise is shrouded in mystery, with theories ranging from poisoning to genetic defects linked to royal incest. His tomb, small and unassuming compared to his predecessors, seems almost like an afterthought. Was it negligence, political maneuvering, or an admission that his reign was a mistake? You wonder if your own body might betray you one day. You examine yourself in the polished bronze mirror, a ritual you perform with a mix of fear and routine. Every blemish, every discoloration becomes a symbol of impending doom. A faint line on your skin is no longer just a mark, it is a harbinger of death. The royal physicians, known as SWNW, are a strange breed. Some are competent, having studied the properties of herbs and surgical techniques handed down over generations. Others are charlatans, motivated more by fear of divine punishment than by any real medical skill. One particularly unsettling figure is the chief physician, Marier, who speaks in riddles and seems to know far too much about your private ailments. He insists on frequent examinations, prodding your body in ways that feel invasive, almost ritualistic. His hands are cold, detached, as if indifferent to your suffering. He prescribes poultices of crocodile fat mixed with frankincense, explaining that the mixture balances the humors of the soul and body alike. You take it, because disobedience is not an option. Suddenly, rumors begin to swirl around the court. Whispers of poison, accusations fly between ministers. The pharaoh's weakness must be addressed, one says quietly, while another counters. It is the gods' will, not human hand, that causes this decline. You can feel their eyes on you, calculating whether your days are numbered. A strange incident compounds your paranoia. A priest is found dead in the temple, a thin trickle of blood seeping from his mouth. Officially, it's called natural causes. The whispers say otherwise. Some speculate that his death was punishment for revealing forbidden knowledge, perhaps even about the pharaoh's illness. No one dares confirm the theory, but the tension in the palace becomes palpable. Even your closest confidants aren't immune from suspicion. The chief steward, once loyal, now seems distant, his eyes veiled as though hiding secrets. The high-ranking military commander, whose allegiance should be unquestionable, avoids your gaze. Every gesture, every word seems calculated to obscure intent. You are trapped in a suffocating cycle. Take the medicine, perform the prayers, observe the omens, wait for signs of either recovery or inevitable collapse. The priests chant, the scribes record, and the physicians perform their bizarre rituals, but none can guarantee your survival. Some nights you lie awake, imagining your funeral procession already underway. The chants, the incense, the mourners, your own legacy folding into ritual before you've even died. And yet, the fear is not of death itself, but of being forgotten. To vanish without a trace, unworthy of a pyramid, unworthy of memory. The ancient curse of immortality becomes clear. It isn't the fear of dying, but the terror of fate. By now you've probably heard plenty of tales about ancient Egyptian inventions, hieroglyphs, pyramids, mummification. But here's one that teeters on the edge of bizarre. The idea that pharaohs and nobles once used crocodile dung as sunscreen. Yeah, that's right, crocodile dung. Before you scoff, imagine the relentless Egyptian sun beating down, turning the desert into an unforgiving oven, your skin drying and cracking like ancient parchment. No wonder they were desperate. You trudge through the palace's sprawling gardens, where papyrus reeds sway under the harsh glare of the midday sun. Servants fan you lazily, their hands moving with mechanical precision, while a line of small dishes filled with oils, perfumes, and pastes awaits your selection. Among them sits a particularly dubious concoction, a thick, pasty mixture rumored to include ground crocodile dung, mixed with animal fat and various aromatic herbs. The legend goes that this sunscreen wasn't just about sun protection. It was also thought to possess sacred protective properties. The crocodile, after all, was not merely a beast but a symbol of divine power, a creature connected to Sobek, the crocodile god of strength, fertility, and protection. Applying the dung was meant to invoke Sobek's favor, ward off evil spirits, and keep the skin miraculously unburned by the desert's cruelty. Historians still argue whether this was actually practiced, or just an absurd myth perpetuated by later generations. Some researchers claim they found traces of organic compounds consistent with animal dung in ancient cosmetic jars, suggesting the tale holds a grain of truth. Others dismiss it as legend, an exaggerated story designed to embarrass a culture obsessed with the bizarre. Regardless of historical accuracy, the idea is rooted in the very logic of survival in an environment where the sun is as much an enemy as any political rival. After all, pharaohs could not afford sunburn. Their appearance was sacred, their skin a reflection of their godhood. Pale skin was seen as divine, while sunburn represented weakness, exposure to chaos. Imagine the ritual itself. You sit motionless while an attendant applies the paste, the texture gritty against your skin, the smell a pungent mixture of earth and decay. The sensation is neither cooling nor soothing but oddly suffocating, as if you're encased in a protective shell of ancient fears. You wonder if the ritual works or if it's simply a placebo, a psychological comfort more than a physical solution. Some scribes refer to the crocodile paste in passing, cloaked in euphemisms and veiled language. One particularly obscure papyrus describes a sacred ointment of the river beast, used by high priests during solar ceremonies, but the exact composition remains unclear. Was it actual crocodile dung, or a symbolic term for something else entirely? You recall that your great-grandfather, Pharaoh Neferhotep, reportedly suffered terribly from sunstroke, despite supposedly adhering to every sacred ritual. The palace records mention his excessive exposure to Ra's light as a sign of negligence, a hint that even the most divine were not immune to the desert's wrath. Still, the practice fits the larger Egyptian worldview. Every action, no matter how strange, serves a dual purpose of practical utility and religious symbolism. Whether it actually prevented sunburn or simply satisfied an ancient superstition, crocodile dung sunscreen became emblematic of a culture trying desperately to control nature through ritual. And you can't help but wonder if, somewhere in the back of your mind, you're applying the paste not because you believe it protects your skin, but because you fear the alternative. You probably think royal families marrying among themselves is a strange quirk of history, a desperate attempt to keep power concentrated. But in ancient Egypt, it was a sacred, almost necessary practice, a divine strategy to maintain the purity of the bloodline. The concept of pharaohs marrying close relatives wasn't just accepted, it was expected. It was, after all, the only way to ensure that the ruler remained godlike. You sit in your private chambers, the golden light of the desert filtering through intricately carved windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Before you stands your sister, your half-sister, your cousin. Titles blend into one another in this world where blood ties are both a blessing and a burden. She smiles at you, eyes careful and calculating because her survival depends on your favor. Her role is not born of love but of duty, ambition, and a shared legacy of divine descent. The ancient belief was simple. The pharaoh's blood was sacred, descended directly from the gods. To dilute it with outsiders, lineage risked weakening not just your rule, but the very stability of Egypt itself. Royal incest was considered a ritual to preserve this purity. Your marriage is a political, religious, and genetic pact all at once, a way to affirm your status as a living deity and to concentrate power. Historians still argue whether this practice was driven purely by theology or political expediency. Some suggest that pharaohs' frequent incestuous relationships were pragmatic moves to prevent rival factions from gaining influence through marriage. Others believe it was a symbolic act designed to emulate the union of deities, like Isis and Osiris, who were siblings in the myths. The genetic consequences, however, were less than divine. You've heard whispers in the court, doctors discussing in hushed tones the strange ailments that sometimes befell royal children. Birth defects, developmental delays, and early deaths are treated like inconvenient facts of life, shrouded in secrecy and thin euphemisms. The palace scribes avoid recording these tragedies with explicit detail, opting instead for vague statements about the will of the gods. One particular case weighs on your mind: the ill-fated child of your great uncle, whose small body was found lifeless in the nursery, a silent casualty of bloodline purity. No official record explains the death. No one dares to question whether it was simply the gods' judgment or the inevitable result of generations of intermarriage. The court's silence is deafening. You wonder if your own existence is part of that same tragic cycle. The more you reflect on your family tree, the more it feels like a closed loop, spiraling inward with no escape. Every new generation is less about vitality and more about survival. The scribes are careful to record your lineage in grand terms, tracing your ancestry back to Ra himself, but they never mention the dark undercurrent of genetic decay. Your advisors, ever pragmatic, argue that such unions reinforce political unity. Marrying within the royal family keeps power centralized, preventing nobles from plotting rebellions through marriage alliances. And so, you marry your half-sister, not out of affection, but because it is expected. The wedding itself is a ceremony of paradox, a display of ultimate power mixed with a subtle acknowledgement of the unnatural. During the union, priests chant hymns not about love, but about stability, cosmic order, and divine right. The entire ritual seems more designed to impress the gods than to celebrate two people's bond. The air is heavy with incense, the smell of frankincense and lotus blending into something faintly acrid. You are told that this act strengthens your divine claim and keeps the kingdom from falling into chaos. But late at night, when the palace is quiet except for the distant croak of frogs near the Nile, you can't help but wonder if you're a sacrificial symbol rather than a ruler, a product of ambition rather than love, a living testament to an ancient system that valued blood purity above all else, even life itself. The whispers in the court grow louder. The gods do not look kindly upon such unions, one says, eyes narrowed. Perhaps they are warning us, another suggests. You don't respond, you cannot. You've probably heard the dramatic stories of slaves toiling endlessly under the scorching sun, forced to build the pyramids as punishment for their crimes or as eternal condemnation. Hollywood loves that version. But the reality, it's far more complicated and far more disturbing in its subtlety. The construction of the pyramids wasn't a slave-driven project in the way you might imagine. Instead, it was a massive state effort, organized with brutal efficiency, driven by your divine command. The workers were primarily skilled laborers, craftsmen, engineers, and seasonal laborers who were paid in food, clothing, and shelter. Some came voluntarily, perhaps drawn by the prestige of contributing to the greatest monuments in human history. Others were conscripted from across Egypt, their service mandatory but temporary. You can still picture the vast encampments near the Giza Plateau, where thousands lived in crude dormitories, their days regimented from sunrise to sunset. The atmosphere is not one of free labor, but of enforced participation, of silent compliance. The overseers move through the lines of workers, shouting orders, their faces impassive as they strike those who falter or slacken. The workers don't chant or protest. They just do their work, brick by brick, stone by stone. Some of them are experts, trained in the complex geometry and logistics of pyramid construction, while others are farmers forced into duty during the Nile's inundation period when their fields are underwater. The work itself is grueling, a dangerous choreography of hauling massive limestone blocks, cutting granite slabs, and painstakingly aligning the structure according to celestial patterns. Historians still argue whether the laborers were truly skilled craftsmen or simply exploited peasants. Excavations have revealed surprisingly well-planned workers' villages, with medical care, bakeries, and organized supply chains, suggesting that the system was more sophisticated than the simplistic slave army narrative. But sophistication doesn't erase suffering. The injuries are ubiquitous: broken limbs, crushed fingers, chronic back pain, and worse. You wonder how many workers were buried in unmarked graves, their deaths erased from the official record. The overseers rarely intervene unless the work is delayed. Compassion is viewed as weakness, and weakness is dangerous. Some whisper that certain workers were chosen for more dubious tasks, ritual sacrifices, or dangerous experiments with early explosives to assist in stone cutting. No evidence confirms this, but the rumors persist, and that's enough to send a chill down your spine. Then there's the deeper, more disturbing question: were any of the workers descendants of conquered peoples, prisoners of war forced into this monumental effort as a means of control and humiliation? The official records never say. The scribes prefer to list them as citizens fulfilling their divine duty. But the lines between citizen and slave blur in the desert heat. You think about the fact that your own position, your divine rule, depends entirely on their suffering. Without the massive pyramids, without these colossal symbols of power, your authority would lack the weight of legend. You'd just be another mortal, vulnerable, and forgettable. The psychological toll on the workers is harder to quantify. Many survive in silence, their faces expressionless, their souls slowly withering beneath the endless weight of granite and expectation. Some try to resist, only to vanish quietly, their fate turned into cautionary tales for the others. Don't slow the line, they are told, or you'll become part of it. There's a particularly chilling story passed among the workers, a tale of a foreman who once refused to order his men to transport a specific block rumored to be cursed. The next morning, he was found dead at the base of the pyramid, his body crushed, arranged almost ceremonially among the stones. No one speaks of it openly, but you can't help but feel the shadow of superstition hanging heavy in the air. Your own involvement is passive. You never touch the blocks, never issue commands in person. Instead, decrees flow from your mouth through intermediaries, written in perfect, elegant script, instructing the overseers on every detail. The moral responsibility is diffused, anonymous, a system designed so no single person feels the weight of guilt. Still, at night, when the palace is silent, you wonder about the faces of those who built your legacy. Faces scratched by stone dust, calloused from relentless labor, eyes dulled by exhaustion. They are the invisible foundation beneath your golden throne. And you fear that, in the end, the pyramid itself may become their tomb, a monument not just to your power, but You've probably been led to believe that ancient Egypt was a society dominated entirely by men, a rigid patriarchal system where only the pharaoh's voice matters. But oddly enough, the reality is far murkier, and frankly, far more intriguing. Women in the Egyptian court weren't just passive figures standing by, draped in jewels and waiting to be admired. They were powerful, cunning, and in some cases, downright dangerous political players. Your mother, the Queen Mother, is the first and most obvious example. Once a young and hopeful noblewoman, she maneuvered her way into the inner circle of power with the grace of a snake and the precision of a tactician. Her eyes have long since lost warmth, replaced by calculating glances that seem to measure your every weakness. She's not merely there to adorn the palace. She rules, subtly, indirectly, and without mercy. The chief queen, too, occupies more than just a ceremonial role. She is the person who bears your children, the symbolic link between you and the next generation of rulers. But behind the silk curtains, she is a master of intrigue, overseeing networks of alliances, whispering into the ears of ministers, and manipulating court affairs from the shadows. Her influence rivals your own, though no official document admits as much. Historians still argue whether women wielded true political power or simply served as pawns in a patriarchal game. Some suggest the Queen Mother and Chief Queen were effectively co-rulers in all but name, making decisions that shaped Egypt's fate. Others insist they were merely figureheads, their power entirely dependent on the goodwill of their male counterparts. Then there are the lesser wives and concubines, many of whom you've come to realize are far more than passive partners. Some have backgrounds in politics, others in military families, and a surprising number are well-educated in administration and law. They converse with scribes, challenge minor officials, and sometimes even advise you directly during private moments. One woman stands out, a concubine named Nefru, known for her sharp wit and unnerving ambition. She's rumored to have connections with powerful regional governors, perhaps even secret ties to foreign lands. Other courtiers treat her with veiled suspicion, but you can't deny the strange magnetism she holds. Her smile hides schemes you'll never uncover. The more you observe, the clearer it becomes. Power in the royal court doesn't simply flow downward from you. It pulses sideways, upward, and in twisted circles you aren't always invited to see. Women wield influence like hidden currents beneath the surface of the palace. Some scholars argue that female rulers like Hatshepsut represent exceptions rather than the rule, glorious anomalies in a male-dominated system. Others argue their very existence proves the essential role of women in maintaining and exercising power. There are ancient tales of women who rose from concubine to co-regent, guiding Egypt through times of turmoil with cunning far surpassing that of their male counterparts. Yet their stories are strangely marginalized, often buried beneath official histories that prefer to present a pharaoh as a lone god-king, untouched by the messy complexities of shared power. You've witnessed your mother manipulate ministers into implementing policies that weren't even yours. You've seen the chief queen orchestrate the downfall of rivals with nothing but a glance and a whispered word. Nefru's presence lingers at every meeting, subtle and unsettling, a reminder that power is never absolute. Even the scribes, tasked with recording history in elegant hieroglyphs, aren't impartial. Their verses sing the glory of the pharaoh, but often obscure the female architects of policy and strategy. In private, they sometimes share rumors of secret councils led by women, where decisions about Egypt's future are debated far from the public eye. You wonder if your reign, in truth, is a shared illusion, one carefully constructed by female hands in the background, ensuring stability while maintaining the image of singular divine rule. As the sun sets and the palace quiets, you feel their presence more acutely than ever. The women of power don't fade into the background. They are the hidden gears in the grand machine of the Egyptian state, turning silently, inexorably, and always watching. You've probably heard that ancient Egypt was a devout society, deeply connected to the pantheon of gods, temples, and sacred rituals. But beneath that pious exterior lurked practices so forbidden, so taboo, they were whispered only in secret, passed from one suspicious priest to another like dangerous contraband. The state religion is, of course, monumental in scale. Public ceremonies in massive temples, chants echoing off sandstone walls, offerings of bread, wine, and rare animals to keep the gods appeased. Officially, nothing exists outside this carefully ordered system. Everything is above board, sacred, orderly. But once you step beyond the public eye, you step into a shadow world of forbidden rites and practices that challenge the very notion of religious purity. One of the most disturbing is the practice of shadow worship, a vague term scribes use in passing, as though trying to bury the concept before anyone can ask too many questions. The rumor is that certain priests, operating in secret chambers below the temples, conduct rituals not for Ra or Osiris, but for darker, forgotten deities. These ceremonies don't involve hymns of praise but whispered curses, offerings of blood rather than bread, and chants spoken in languages no longer understood by the public. Historians still argue whether such shadow worship was actual practice or later propaganda used to discredit rival priesthoods. Some suggest it was a way to manage power struggles within the religious hierarchy, an accusation leveled against opponents to justify their downfall. Others believe traces of ancient, pre-pharaonic cults survived in these underground rites, surviving relics of a time before the official gods reigned supreme. You don't dare pry too deeply, of course. The high priest Amenhotep guards these secrets with an iron fist, his cold eyes betraying no remorse or guilt, only an unsettling certainty that some knowledge is too dangerous for mortal minds. You've seen him descend into the temple's subterranean chambers alone, his footsteps swallowed by silence. No one questions it, no one dares. The forbidden rites are said to include animal sacrifices far beyond the standard offerings to the gods. While public rituals involve lambs or geese, these secret ceremonies allegedly demand the blood of rare and exotic creatures, crocodiles, serpents, even lions. Some whisper, in hushed fear, that human sacrifices occurred on the darkest nights, hidden by layers of secrecy that erased all trace. There's one particular story you've heard, too absurd to believe yet impossible to ignore. It speaks of a sect within the priesthood that sought immortality not through ritual, but through consuming the flesh of the sacred, believing that by ingesting the body of a chosen animal, they could absorb its power. The official record calls it heresy. The whispered legend calls it fact. One scribe once hinted at a forbidden book, a volume of ancient spells written in lost scripts, locked away in a hidden vault beneath the temple of Karnak. No one has ever seen it, and no one dares look for it. You suspect that Amenhotep guards it, perhaps even communes with it, using its arcane knowledge to maintain his own grip on power. Your own fear of these practices isn't religious, it's pragmatic. You don't believe in curses or divine retribution, but you do believe in power. And power, you realize, thrives in the shadows. During state ceremonies, priests chant official hymns extolling Ra and Osiris, but you often wonder if their eyes glaze over at some hidden word or phrase meant only for the initiated. The subtle inflections, the barely perceptible pauses, are they unintentional or deliberate signals to other believers? There is a growing paranoia too. Every ritual feels like a test, every incense plume a potential smokescreen for something darker. The temple walls seem to breathe, ancient stone hiding secrets, ancient voices waiting to be heard. Some nights, you dream of secret chambers filled with arcane symbols, where the high priest performs rites that defy understanding, rituals promising immortality, power beyond comprehension, and knowledge that mortals were never meant to hold. You wonder if these forbidden practices are simply a shadow reflection of the official religion, proof that the divine order you uphold rests not on piety, but on suppression. You probably think the afterlife is a distant, ethereal place, reserved for dreams and prayers. But for a pharaoh, it's a practical obsession, a detailed blueprint you obsess over in your waking life. Because in ancient Egypt, death isn't the end. It's an elaborate, meticulously planned extension of your rule. Your every action, every word, every breath in this life is designed to ensure that you don't just survive death, but thrive in the next world. The preparation begins long before you even think about it, with rituals, sacred texts, and the construction of your eternal resting place, your tomb. The process of afterlife preparation is nothing short of fanatical. You don't just build a pyramid. You commission entire complexes of temples, chapels, and mortuary buildings. Your burial chamber is not a simple grave, but an intricate labyrinth designed to reflect your status as a divine being. Every wall is covered in hieroglyphs, prayers, spells, and instructions carefully chosen from the Book of the Dead to guide you through the perilous journey after death. Historians still argue whether the massive resources devoted to afterlife preparation reflect true religious conviction or a political effort to maintain power beyond the grave. Some suggest that the pharaohs genuinely believed their elaborate tombs would sustain their eternal existence. Others argue that these were symbolic power plays, designed to intimidate rivals and impress the living. You trudge through the dimly lit corridors of your own unfinished tomb, feeling the weight of stone pressing against you. The air is cool and musty, a stark contrast to the desert heat outside. Workmen chisel carefully, each strike of their tools echoing like a heartbeat, marking progress toward your immortality. The most peculiar aspect of this obsession is the sheer quantity of objects buried alongside you. Food offerings, furniture, chariots, weapons, even small models of servants and animals. Everything you might need in the afterlife is meticulously arranged, as though you'll be taking your earthly life with you. One strange and rather morbid custom involves miniature servant figurines, known as shabti, crafted to perform any labor you might require in the next life. These small statues, etched with spells and your name, are not just symbols but functional replacements, believed to magically animate and do your bidding beyond death. You wonder if they were ever meant to replace real servants, in case your power did not survive the transition. A fringe but persistent theory claims that the more lavish the burial, the more likely the pharaoh believed they would ascend to godhood in the afterlife. Some scholars argue that this wasn't purely about belief, but a race to outdo predecessors, each burial becoming grander, more ostentatious, and increasingly detached from practicality. Then there's the issue of mummification, a ritual as mysterious as it is meticulous. The process itself is long and fraught with superstition. Your body is carefully embalmed, drained of fluids, and packed with natron to dry out every cell. Organs are removed, preserved separately, and stored in canopic jars, each overseen by a different deity. The heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and emotion, remains in the body, essential for your judgment in the afterlife. You're told that if your body decays, your spirit will wander, lost and restless. The tomb must remain sealed, intact, forever protected against grave robbers and time itself. Every stone laid, every wall painted, every spell inscribed is a brick in the wall against oblivion. Some scholars suggest that this extreme obsession reflects a deeper existential fear, a fear that the pharaoh's status as a god in life might be meaningless in death without careful preparation. Others claim it was merely propaganda, a public performance to reinforce the idea of divine rule. Still, as you walk through the unfinished halls, the distant echo of workers' tools ringing in your ears, you can't shake the feeling that the real terror isn't death itself, but imperfection in death. Because what is a pharaoh if not eternally perfect? You've probably seen those graceful images of Egyptian gods with animal heads, the hawk-headed Horus, the jackal-headed Anubis, and the cow-headed Hathor. But what you don't realize is how deeply animals were woven into the very fabric of power, politics, and religion in ancient Egypt. Animals weren't just symbols. They were divine, political, and sometimes deadly instruments of control. Every morning you step into a palace where animals are not pets or livestock. They are sacred beings. Cats are everywhere, slipping silently between servants' feet, lounging atop golden thrones, eyes gleaming with ancient knowing. They're no ordinary creatures. They're living embodiments of Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, and protection. But the reverence for animals extends far beyond cats. Falcons are kept in cages near the palace, treated not as mere birds of prey, but as messengers of Horus himself. You're told they see farther, understand more, and could spy on rivals if only their eyes would speak. Servants feed them carefully, performing elaborate rituals that include chanting prayers and anointing them with perfumed oils. Some animals are more unsettling. Crocodiles, for example, symbolize Sobek, the fierce, unpredictable god of the Nile. Entire temples are devoted to them, and in some cases, living crocodiles are kept in pools where priests perform ceremonies involving offerings of food and sometimes blood. The line between reverence and fear blurs. It's said that harming one of these sacred beasts is punishable by death, a law you neither confirm nor deny, but prefer not to test. Historians still argue whether animal worship was genuinely spiritual or simply political theater. Some claim that animals were worshipped as literal gods, carefully bred and revered. Others argue they were political symbols, a convenient way to display the pharaoh's dominion over nature and chaos. You recall one particularly bizarre ceremony, held annually during the festival of Opet. The high priest brings forth a sacred bull, the Apis bull, considered an earthly manifestation of Ptah, the creator god. The animal is paraded through the streets, adorned in gold and jewels, its every step followed by chants and flutes. Then it is led to a special altar, where priests offer lavish portions of bread and wine. But what happens next remains shrouded in secrecy. Some believe the bull is ritually slaughtered as a form of sacred sacrifice. Others insist it is allowed to live, continuing its role as divine intermediary. The ambiguity feeds the mystery. No official record clarifies the outcome, leaving only whispered theories that have evolved into conspiracy. Your unease deepens when you consider the black jackal statues scattered throughout the palace grounds. Anubis, protector of the dead and guide of souls, is not only a religious figure but a constant reminder of mortality and judgment. Servants bow whenever they pass these effigies, and at times, you swear their eyes seem to flicker with life. There are even rumors that some of the palace cats were not ordinary felines but priestly initiates in disguise, able to relay information back to hidden councils. You dismiss this as superstition, yet can't help but glance over your shoulder when a cat crosses your path, its eyes locking onto yours just a fraction too long. The most disturbing animal connection, however, is with mummified creatures. In elaborate burial chambers, thousands of animal mummies are entombed alongside the human dead. Some are ibises, others crocodiles, cats, or even bulls. Their presence isn't merely symbolic, it's functional. Supposedly, these mummified animals serve as companions or servants in the afterlife, or as vessels to absorb curses and evil spirits before they reach you. There's one particular discovery that keeps you awake at night: a sealed chamber filled entirely with mummified cats, all of them carefully wrapped, identical in size and appearance. The purpose of this massive accumulation remains debated. Some scholars argue they represent mass offerings to Bastet. Others suggest a darker explanation, a failed ritual, an attempt to pacify a deity that was never satisfied. The sacred status of animals makes you wonder about their agency. Are they passive symbols, revered and protected, or active participants in the palace's hidden networks of power and You've probably heard of the grand temples of Egypt, immense structures with towering columns, gleaming statues, and walls covered in ornate hieroglyphs. But what you don't hear about are the hidden temples, secret chambers, and underground passageways concealed within these sacred complexes. They're not mapped in official records. Their entrances are veiled by dust, shadow, and deliberate omission. You wander the temple of Karnak as the sun begins to set, the golden light softening the sharp edges of columns, while shadows deepen around every corner. To the public, this temple is a place of worship, awe, and ceremony. But for those who know where to look, there's a network of concealed chambers carved beneath its foundation, a labyrinth of stone corridors where whispers of forbidden rituals echo through the ages. These secret rooms aren't just for hiding treasures. Some are said to house ancient relics, objects too powerful or too profane for the general populace to see. Small altars bear symbols erased from the official canon. Cryptic inscriptions, covered in soot, seem to mock the public prayers etched into the temple walls. You're told these rooms were used for rites too dangerous, too shameful for open practice. Historians still argue whether these hidden chambers were part of original temple design or later additions by secretive priesthood factions. Some suggest they were created to hide politically sensitive artifacts. Others believe they served purely esoteric functions, places where powerful magic was practiced beyond the scrutiny of state-sanctioned religion. One such chamber is known only as the Hall of the Forgotten. Its entrance is concealed behind a movable limestone block, requiring a precise sequence of pressure points to unlock, a mechanism lost to time. Rumor claims that inside this hall rests an altar used for sacrifices far removed from the public eye. Some whisper that even now, a lone priest tends it, performing rituals that would drive ordinary men mad. You recall tales of pharaohs descending into these forbidden depths, seeking counsel not from gods or advisors, but from shadowy forces invoked in silence. One legend speaks of a pharaoh who supposedly vanished for 7 days within the labyrinth, emerging changed, his eyes distant and unreadable. The official account calls it a pilgrimage of spiritual enlightenment. Whispers suggest something far darker. These hidden chambers are often tied to political intrigue as much as religious secrecy. Some are used to hold prisoners, political rivals whose existence must be erased. Others are repositories of documents and scrolls too sensitive for official archives. Maps showing foreign lands, notes on forbidden practices, lists of hidden alliances, all stored in chambers guarded by curses, traps, and secrecy. There's one persistent rumor of a subterranean passage connecting the Temple of Karnak to the palace itself. Supposedly, this secret tunnel allows high priests or rival courtiers to meet the pharaoh in absolute privacy, bypassing official channels entirely. No physical evidence confirms its existence, but some sworn conspirators have claimed to traverse it in whispers, using it to plot or to influence decisions away from the public eye. Archaeologists have uncovered partial evidence of hidden rooms beneath various temples, but their exact purpose remains a puzzle. Some chambers are filled with shattered pottery, discarded ritual objects, or fragments of unknown texts written in now-lost scripts. Others are perfectly preserved, sealed as if awaiting an unseen apocalypse. You can't shake the feeling that these spaces were designed not just for secrecy, but for control. The very architecture seems intent on obscuring the truth. Each hidden room, each sealed door, each secret corridor reinforces the power of those who know about them, priests, high officials, and of course you. Because in ancient Egypt, the public face of piety is only one layer. Beneath it lies an entire world built on omission, fear, and power disguised as silence. You've probably imagined the pharaoh as an invincible god walking among mortals, untouchable, all-knowing, and entirely in control. But beneath the gilded veneer lies something far more human: fear. Deep, unsettling fear that gnaws at the edges of every decision you make, every decree you issue, and every breath you take. It's not the fear of death. Pharaohs are meant to transcend that. It's the fear of imperfection, of failure, of being exposed as merely human. You lie in your private chambers, the faint hum of servants, whispers just outside the walls, and feel it. A tremor that no amount of divine rite or ritual can fully suppress. Your greatest fear is power slipping away. It doesn't matter how many temples you build, how many animals you worship, or how many enemies you eliminate. There's always the gnawing suspicion that someone, somewhere, is plotting your downfall. The vizier, the high priest, your own siblings, all seem like potential threats. You know better than to trust smiles. Every friendly gesture hides the possibility of betrayal. Historians still argue whether these phobias were born from genuine threats or carefully manufactured paranoia to justify autocratic control. Some believe that pharaohs genuinely feared rivals and conspiracies, while others suggest these fears were amplified and institutionalized to manipulate the masses into blind loyalty. Then there's the fear of being forgotten. Unlike the gods you claim to descend from, your name is mortal. Without monuments, without eternal decrees, without perfect afterlife preparation, you risk fading into oblivion. The very construction of the pyramids, the obsessive preservation of your body, and the endless commissioning of temples are desperate attempts to stave off that fate. There's also a more personal, more insidious fear, the fear of being alone. In public, you are surrounded by advisors, priests, concubines, and servants, but in private, the palace feels vast and hollow. Each hallway stretches endlessly, each room more opulent and empty than the last. The faces around you are masks, performances designed to flatter or manipulate. No one dares to speak true thoughts. You've heard of other pharaohs who succumbed to madness, their paranoia spiraling into violent decrees and self-destruction. Some say Pharaoh Pepi II ruled for over 90 years, growing increasingly isolated and disconnected, until his court consisted only of mute servants. You wonder if you are destined for the same fate. Your dreams betray you. Visions of decayed temples, of your name erased from stone, of whispers saying, "He was never divine." You dream of walking endlessly through desert sands, unable to find shade or purpose, your crown slipping from your head like a dead weight. The priests don't comfort you. Their chants feel hollow, their assurances mechanical. The scribes record your words as if they were law, but their eyes betray doubt, perhaps even contempt. You can feel the subtle shift in their demeanor when they think you aren't looking. There's one particularly persistent fear that claws at your thoughts, the fear of your own weakness. What if the gods abandon you? What if your carefully constructed facade of perfection cracks, revealing your vulnerability to the world? You've seen other rulers fall, their bodies dragged from thrones, their names cursed, their line erased. Their fates are warnings, written in whispers and omitted from official chronicles. Every sunrise feels like a test. Every ritual performed is a small defiance against entropy. You repeat the sacred hymns, you offer the prescribed sacrifices, and you don elaborate garments, hoping they shield not only your body but your soul. You've probably imagined the pharaoh as an invincible god walking among mortals, untouchable, all-knowing, and entirely in control. But beneath the gilded veneer lies something far more human: fear. Deep, unsettling fear that gnaws at the edges of every decision you make, every decree you issue, and every breath you take. It's not the fear of death. Pharaohs are meant to transcend that. It's the fear of imperfection, of failure, of being exposed as merely human. You lie in your private chambers, the faint hum of servants, whispers just outside the walls, and feel it. A tremor that no amount of divine rite or ritual can fully suppress. Your greatest fear is power slipping away. It doesn't matter how many temples you build, how many animals you worship, or how many enemies you eliminate. There's always the gnawing suspicion that someone, somewhere, is plotting your downfall. The vizier, the high priest, your own siblings, all seem like potential threats. You know better than to trust smiles. Every friendly gesture hides the possibility of betrayal. Historians still argue whether these phobias were born from genuine threats or carefully manufactured paranoia to justify autocratic control. Some believe that pharaohs genuinely feared rivals and conspiracies, while others suggest these fears were amplified and institutionalized to manipulate the masses into blind loyalty. Then there's the fear of being forgotten. Unlike the gods you claim to descend from, your name is mortal. Without monuments, without eternal decrees, without perfect afterlife preparation, you risk fading into oblivion. The very construction of the pyramids, the obsessive preservation of your body, and the endless commissioning of temples are desperate attempts to stave off that fate. There's also a more personal, more insidious fear, the fear of being alone. In public, you are surrounded by advisors, priests, concubines, and servants, but in private, the palace feels vast and hollow. Each hallway stretches endlessly, each room more opulent and empty than the last. The faces around you are masks, performances designed to flatter or manipulate. No one dares to speak true thoughts. You've heard of other pharaohs who succumbed to madness, their paranoia spiraling into violent decrees and self-destruction. Some say Pharaoh Pepi II ruled for over 90 years, growing increasingly isolated and disconnected, until his court consisted only of mute servants. You wonder if you are destined for the same fate. Your dreams betray you. Visions of decayed temples, of your name erased from stone, of whispers saying, "He was never divine." You dream of walking endlessly through desert sands, unable to find shade or purpose, your crown slipping from your head like a dead weight. The priests don't comfort you. Their chants feel hollow, their assurances mechanical. The scribes record your words as if they were law, but their eyes betray doubt, perhaps even contempt. You can feel the subtle shift in their demeanor when they think you aren't looking. There's one particularly persistent fear that claws at your thoughts, the fear of your own weakness. What if the gods abandon you? What if your carefully constructed facade of perfection cracks, revealing your vulnerability to the world? You've seen other rulers fall, their bodies dragged from thrones, their names cursed, their line erased. Their fates are warnings, written in whispers and omitted from official chronicles. Every sunrise feels like a test. Every ritual performed is a small defiance against entropy. You repeat the sacred hymns, you offer the prescribed sacrifices, and you don elaborate garments, hoping they shield not only your body but your soul. You've probably imagined the pharaoh as a figure of absolute wealth, untouchable, bathed in gold and surrounded by abundance. But the truth is far more disturbing. Beneath the gilded splendor lies hidden debt, mountains of obligation owed to priests, nobles, and foreign powers that threaten to unravel your rule from within. The wealth of the Egyptian state flows through your hands, or so it seems. In reality, every grain of grain, every ounce of gold, every crafted statue is pledged to someone whose patience is wearing thin. You recall the grand temples you commissioned, built with the sweat of your laborers and the tax of your people. On paper, they are symbols of divine power and legacy. But in practice, each temple stands as a debt, a monumental IOU to the priesthood that provides your religious legitimacy. The more lavish the temple, the larger the debt. Priests who once served humbly now demand privileges, influence, and control in exchange for their silence and approval. Historians still argue whether these financial entanglements were systemic corruption or necessary governance. Some suggest the pharaohs deliberately indebted themselves to maintain the support of powerful religious factions. Others claim it was the inevitable result of state expansion, ambitious projects that outpaced the treasury's capacity. There are whispered tales of loans from foreign merchants, recorded in obscure papyri now locked away in secret archives. You know these transactions exist, ships arriving at the Nile's delta with exotic goods, laden with precious metals in exchange for future favors. These deals are not public knowledge, of course. To reveal them would be political suicide. One of your most pressing debts is owed to the powerful priesthood of Amun. They've supported your rise to power, granted legitimacy when rivals questioned your claim, and secured your position in the pantheon of rulers. In return, they expect unwavering loyalty, access to state resources, and a share of the state's harvest. You remember the tension during last year's harvest festival. The high priest subtly suggested that the temple's grain stores had mysteriously diminished, a thinly veiled accusation that the state diverted supplies. The court murmured. You smiled, dismissing it as rumor, but the unease remained. There are nobles too, old families whose allegiance you purchased with titles, land grants, and marriages. Each favor you grant comes with an invisible price tag, written in silent expectations of loyalty, military service, and political support. Some nobles now behave as though they own pieces of the kingdom, their arrogance growing alongside your anxiety. Foreign debts are even more precarious. You suspect certain envoys are less interested in diplomacy than in tracking your weaknesses, trading gold for influence in ways your scribes are instructed never to record. Rumors swirl of secret treaties, where Egypt promised future military assistance or political neutrality in exchange for current wealth. One obscure tale tells of a pharaoh who mortgaged entire provinces in return for grain during a particularly harsh famine, a desperate measure that backfired when the local governors began acting as de facto independent rulers. Your own advisors tread carefully around these topics, their words carefully chosen to avoid mention of debts. The term itself is taboo, an admission of weakness. Instead, they speak of obligations, pious responsibilities, and sacred duties. But you know the difference. Some nights you tally the debts in your mind, a silent ledger only you can see. Every unpaid favor, every silent nod to a powerful priest, every veiled agreement is a weight you carry, heavier than the crown upon your brow. And you wonder, how long before the debts call in their favors? Because in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh isn't just ruler. He's debtor, prisoner, and pawn, all rolled into one. You've probably imagined the pharaoh as an untouchable figure of perfect health, radiant, eternally youthful, untouched by illness or weakness. But the truth is far more complicated and far more disturbing. Your daily regimen is not just about rituals and prayers. It's a carefully controlled sequence of treatments, diets, and secret remedies designed to preserve your body against the ravages of time. You rise early, long before the sun spills golden light across the palace, and begin with a series of purifications, oil baths infused with exotic herbs imported from distant lands, and massages delivered by specially trained servants whose touch is as clinical as it is ritual. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptian medical practices were genuinely effective or more about superstition than science. Some insist their knowledge of anatomy and disease was surprisingly advanced, using methods such as trepanation to relieve pressure from the skull or herbal concoctions with proven medicinal properties. Others claim the remedies were largely symbolic, meant to reassure the pharaoh's divine status, while doing little to halt the slow march of age and illness. Your diet is strict, more ritual than nourishment. You consume rare delicacies meant to symbolize divine favor, figs, dates, and honey mixed with oils from foreign trees, sometimes infused with mysterious powders or extracts. Some foods are banned, believed to attract disease or invite spiritual impurity. Still, you eat them, knowing they're prescribed not for taste but for their supposed magical efficacy. Then there are the secret potions, recipes whispered from one generation of court physicians to the next. None are written down. The ingredients are always ambiguous: ground beetles, crushed serpent scales, and dried roots whose names have been lost to time. The effect is uncertain. Some claim these elixirs prolong life. Others argue they hasten decay, subtly poisoning the body over time. You remember the whispers of a particularly strange treatment, a rare paste applied to your skin, said to reflect divine light and ward off disease. The formula is jealously guarded by your chief physician, known for his stoic silence and unsettling gaze. Some court gossip claims the paste contains crocodile fat, sourced from sacred animals, of course combined with powdered minerals that supposedly promote vitality but might just be slow-acting toxins. One particularly curious medical practice involves spiritual bleeding, where your physician punctures the skin to release what they claim are harmful spirits trapped in your body. The practice is said to prevent illness, though its efficacy is highly debated. Scholars remain divided. Was this an early understanding of infection control or a ritualistic placebo, giving the illusion of care while achieving nothing? Your teeth are another point of obsession. You brush them daily with abrasive mixtures made from ground ox hooves and powdered bones, methods that keep decay at bay, but also wear them down prematurely. You wonder whether the abrasive cleaners were designed more for show than health, a symbolic cleansing of impurities. The court physicians speak in hushed tones of a mysterious condition they call the shadow of the Pharaoh, a slowly encroaching weakness that no treatment can halt. It manifests subtly: tremors in your hands, brief bouts of dizziness, moments when your voice falters. None of it is officially acknowledged, of course. The public face of health remains flawless. You've heard the most unsettling fringe theory, one that suggests certain pharaohs deliberately ingested small doses of poison over decades, thinking that low-level toxins would build immunity or grant secret longevity. The theory is dismissed by most, but the more you consider it, the more it seems plausible. You've also come to suspect that some of your closest servants are trained not merely to care for you, but to monitor these treatments, ensuring nothing strays from the prescribed regimen. Their presence is unnerving, their eyes calculating, as though every twitch of your skin, every falter in your step, is being recorded and reported. Even the most routine checkups feel like examinations not of your body, but of your destiny. The scribes record every detail in private medical scrolls, entries unread by anyone but the most trusted. Each note serves as a silent reminder that your health is a commodity, precious, fragile, and perpetually under surveillance. Because in ancient Egypt, maintaining the illusion of divine perfection is You've probably chuckled at the modern obsession with curses, the idea that a forgotten pharaoh's tomb could unleash death and madness upon any intruder. But in ancient Egypt, superstition wasn't a silly fear reserved for peasants or the ill-educated. It was a serious, meticulously managed component of power. The palace is riddled with objects shrouded in legend. Amulets, statues, and jewelry, each believed to possess protective power or, in some cases, dangerous curses designed to punish the unworthy. You don't scoff. You don't dismiss them as folklore. Instead, you treat them like loaded weapons, necessary tools that must be wielded with caution. One such object is the famed Eye of Horus amulet, a tiny piece of lapis lazuli carved with perfect precision. You wear it at all times, pressed against your chest beneath royal garments. It's not just decoration, it's a talisman to ward off evil spirits, a shield against unseen forces that seek to unravel you. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in cursed objects reflected genuine fear or was institutionalized control. Some claim these were real precautions, rooted in empirical observations of bad luck following particular disturbances. Others suggest they were tools of political manipulation, an elaborate form of psychological warfare aimed at keeping rivals compliant and peasants obedient. You recall the most infamous cursed artifact, a small, unassuming funerary statue known simply as the Silent One. Legend says it was crafted by a forgotten priest, long dead, whose final curse imbued the object with a malevolent spirit. Supposedly, every person who owned the statue suffered a tragic fate until it was buried beneath a sealed floor in a remote temple, where it remains to this day. The superstitions don't stop there. Servants never sweep floors after sunset, believing they might sweep away good fortune. Mirrors are covered when not in use, lest they trap the soul. You were told as a child that breaking pottery brings disaster, and still, the sound of shattered ceramic makes you wince. One rather fringe but persistent theory claims that curses weren't accidental or superstitious at all. Rather, they were deliberately crafted by priests or rivals as a form of lethal psychological warfare, ancient propaganda disguised as fear. The idea is that if enough people believe in the curse, its power becomes self-fulfilling, a manifestation of collective dread. You think of the dozens of objects locked away in secret chambers, jeweled ankhs, black obsidian scarabs, statues of unknown origin. Each one comes with its own whispered tale. Some are said to have been found in tombs of disgraced pharaohs, buried with them as eternal punishment. Others were gifted by foreign rulers under dubious terms, their provenance deliberately obscured. Your personal chambers even contain one particularly unnerving object, a small obsidian mirror, rumored to show not your reflection, but glimpses of death. No official record mentions it, and your closest confidants avoid speaking of it altogether. But at night, you sometimes catch its surface seeming to ripple, as if alive. The most unsettling superstition involves the ritual of the numbing of shadows, an obscure ceremony where priests chant a pharaoh's hidden fears, binding them into a figurative object to be locked away. The idea is that by personifying fear, it can be controlled, even expelled. Whether this works or not remains a subject of debate. Some say it's a psychological trick. Others whisper it's dangerously effective. The palace's architecture itself seems to reflect these beliefs. Statues of protective deities line hallways not just for decoration, but to guard against unseen threats. Hidden symbols are carved into stone walls, symbols only visible under torchlight, designed to confuse or repel spirits. Every object you possess, every piece of jewelry, every sacred relic seems alive with purpose. Some serve to protect, some to curse, and some, perhaps both. Because in ancient Egypt, superstition isn't ignorance. You've probably assumed that a pharaoh's legacy is built solely on monuments, military victories, and divine proclamations. But the truth is far more disturbing. Your legacy is a fragile web of fear, power, and perception, an intricate dance designed to endure long after your body turns to dust. Every decision you make is calculated to ensure that your influence lingers. The grand temples, towering statues, and monumental pyramids aren't simply artistic achievements. They're tools of psychological domination, reminders to the living that you were once a god walking among them. The inscriptions etched into stone aren't just prayers, they're warnings, subtle suggestions that rebellion carries consequences even beyond death. Historians still argue whether this focus on fear was a deliberate tool of governance or an unavoidable consequence of divine rule. Some suggest the pharaohs intentionally cultivated an aura of terror to maintain absolute control. Others argue that the fear stemmed naturally from the precariousness of power, every ruler aware that rivals, conspiracies, and fate itself could topple them in an instant. The palace you walk through daily is both a home and a theater of influence. Every corridor, every hidden chamber, every strategically placed statue reinforces authority. Servants and courtiers know that every whispered word, every small misstep is observed and remembered. Loyalty is rarely earned. It is demanded, cultivated through subtle intimidation, ceremonial grandeur, and the implicit threat of divine retribution. Even your death is part of the performance. The rituals surrounding your burial, the lavish funerary goods, and the intricate mummification are designed to project power across time. They tell the living, you are not only divine but eternal, a ruler whose reach stretches beyond mortal comprehension. It's a statement designed to prevent doubt, to keep rivals in awe or in fear, even centuries later. The fear you cultivate isn't limited to mortals. Your obsession with divine protection, amulets, curses, sacred animals, hidden rituals, is a form of insurance against chaos. You shape the narrative of your own power, blending reality and myth until the two are indistinguishable. Those who follow your story see not a man but an icon, a being whose very existence demanded reverence. One of the most curious and subtle aspects of this legacy is its psychological impact. The citizens, priests, and soldiers internalize your presence even when you are gone. They adjust their behavior, their thoughts, and their allegiances based on the shadow you cast. You realize that fear is not merely a tool, it is an extension of your rule, intangible yet deeply effective. Then there are the strange, almost supernatural consequences. People say your influence lingers in the very stones of the temples, in the patterns of shadows, in the whispers of the wind across the pyramids. Some claim that those who disrespect your memory encounter misfortune, though whether this is coincidence or superstition is a matter of scholarly debate. Your name, your image, and your myth become inseparable from the landscape. Even as centuries pass, future rulers will invoke your power, either to align with it or to distance themselves from it. In this way, your fear, cultivated so carefully, becomes immortal, a ghostly hand guiding the course of history long after you've left the world of the living. And as you sit in your private chambers, reflecting on all this, you understand the cruel truth. Being a pharaoh isn't just about ruling while alive. It's about commanding reverence, awe, and fear long after death has claimed you. Your monuments, rituals, and secrets are instruments to orchestrate this enduring legacy, ensuring that the world remembers not merely your victories, but the pervasive sense of power that once belonged only to you. Because in the end, the truest pharaoh's achievement is control, not just over the living, but over memory itself.